Hello and welcome to Delmar TV. Recently, Columbus residents have voted overwhelmingly to last election to add more oversight to police. Columbus Mayor Andrew Ginther says that the city has already instituted several reforms, but one of the biggest is still yet to be implemented. Columbus is the only major city in America that does not have some sort of a civilian oversight. Today, we have a special guest, a young dynamic lawyer by the name of Emmanuel Olawale, who is a general practitioner. Emmanuel, welcome to Delmar TV.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be on the show.
Let me ask you by starting with this: will the civilian review board have the right to subpoena power or authority to conduct independent investigation?
Yeah, I think the Civilian Review Board is something that we need in Columbus. Basically, maybe every major city in Ohio should have one. And I believe that the Civilian Review Board should have all the powers that they need to actually hold the police accountable. And they should have the subpoena power. They should have the investigative power. They should have the power to recommend prosecution, and they should have the power to just have the general oversight of the Columbus Police Division. So, to answer your question, I believe the Civilian Review Board should have a subpoena power.
From an independent standpoint, who should make up the board, do you think?
From what the name implies, civilians, those should be held by people from the community, because the police is are members of the community. We pay, we pay their salaries. We hire them. They serve the community. They serve the public. So the public should be able to review or investigate or to have oversight over them. So they should be made up of, members of the community from diverse walks of life, from every community, the Somali community, the immigrant community, the African American community, the from all walks of life. It should be a diverse body so that each person within the board can understand, can be able to bring perspective as to what is going on in their community. Because if you look at law enforcement, the way law enforcement is being practiced differs from one community to the other. What the problem that you have in Northeast Columbus is different from what you have when you go to further down Columbus. The problem you have in the suburbs is different from what you have in Central Columbus. So every part of the community should have a say or should have a seat within the Civilian Review Board.
How effective do you think the current new board will be since they have been selected by the mayor? I know we're early stage, but how effective do you think they will be?
That's gonna be conjectural. What I mean by that is that we can only guess. We don't know how effective it's going to be until at least we have them, sworn in and they start operating. I believe that the fact that a board will be in place in itself will be a safeguard, both for the community and for the police department itself. Right now, the division of police, I know there has no outside review board or outside reviewer. So in a way, they self-regulate. And what we've noticed in the past is that self-regulation by police division doesn't really work, because what happened is that you can't really self-regulate yourself if you are the one committing atrocities. I'm not saying that the Columbus police is going out committing atrocities, but we've had incidences where people are either harassed, wrongly stopped, wrongly arrested, or wrongly shot. And if you give the perpetrator the opportunity to be the one to investigate themselves, chances are you're not going to get a fair, impartial, or justifiable result. What you're going to get is going to be a biased result that favors the police officer. But having a review board that is independent of the police force, independent of the FOP, independent of the officer, I believe will be effective as long as the community that empowers them also give them all the full authority, give them the full support, and give them all the necessary tools that they need. And as long as the board is made up of independent people who can see things in a way that is going to be fair, impartial, and justifiable. It's just like having a jury in a case. You don't want, even when you're making jury selection, you wanted to know, is anyone within the jury who is going to be biased? For instance, now let's assume that I file a lawsuit against, let me just choose a random body against the company. I wouldn't name a company. If we go to trial, I wouldn't want someone that works for that company or someone within the family of people that works there to be a part of the jury, because that itself will result in bias. So I believe that I believe that they'll be effective as long as they give them the power and the authority to be able to do their independent investigation.
Columbus rarely indicts any officer that has behaved misconduct. Do you think it's necessary for the board to go through a screening or psychological assessment as the law officers goes through?
It's the Civilian Review Board is going to be made up of private citizens,
Right.
just like you and me. The same way you don't ask a jury on a case to go through psychological assessment, just like a defendant in a criminal case might go through. I don't believe that a civilian review board, or for you to be a member, you have to go through a psychological assessment. Requiring that is like us making some kind of false equivalency, some false equivalence. Civilian review board members are only there as to oversee the police division. They don't have to go through any kind of psychological assessment. As long as they find them to be qualified to be a respectable member of the society, they are free of having some kind of ongoing investigation. They don't have past criminal history. They don't belong to any kind of criminal enterprise. As long as they are upstanding citizens, I think that should be enough to be a member of the board without having to go through any kind of psychological assessment.
We don't know what the board will be, but in order to expand their power or to reduce their power, the review board, do we as the voters do we have to go back to the ballot, or is there would be another way of to reduce or increase their power?
I think that would depend on how the public and the police division or any other stakeholders respond when the boards, are empowered or when they are, being sworn in. If there are legal challenges to the power that they will have, then maybe we may have to take it back to the ballot to have the people confer more powers or to amend their powers. But otherwise, if there are no legal challenges to them, I don't think we need to go back to the ballot every time we need to make changes. So it will depend on whether or not, there are some kind of constitutional challenges to their power.
This is one. Maybe it says a lot about the prosecutor that was in charge. And now we have a new prosecutor. Well, my question is, why are Columbus officers rarely indicted, and the civilian review board change that?
My hope is that the Civilian Review Board will be able to hold police officers who go beyond the power conferred on them to be able to hold them accountable. As to why we've never had police officers indicted in the past, I think that has to do with either politics or who the prosecutor is. Most often times, when you have a city prosecutor who normally, if a prosecutor go, always in lockstep with the police division, chances are you're not going to have police being indicted for wrongful conduct because the prosecutor's office is a political position, and most of these politicians want the FOP to support them, and most of them think that if the FOP is not behind them, they might not be able to win elections. So what happened in that situation is that even in the situation where a police officer gets, performs, wrongfully, they are not subject to the kind of investigation that a private citizen will be subjected to. For instance, the prosecutor might not even have access to interview them first without the police division conducting their own internal investigation. And what you find out is that the prosecutor's office most oftentimes do not want to go against the police division, thinking that they work because they work together. Because most of the cases that the prosecutors prosecute comes from recommendation from the police division. So the fear of having a kind of adversarial relationship with the police division makes the prosecutors to not want to go against them. But in a society where we want fairness, justice, equity, and equality, I think the prosecutor should be independent of the police division. You can still work together without being co-conspirators in meting out injustice to a particular population. And if we look at even the history of who has been indicted in the past, I think only you find out that if black or colored police officers, the police officers that have been indicted in the past, has to do with a black police officer who committed infraction against a white resident. The other way around, even we see the same thing happening in Minnesota when an African American or a black Somali American police officer killed a white woman. He was indicted, it was tried, and it was convicted. The same thing has been happening in Columbus. When white officers commit infractions against minority communities, chances are they don't get indicted. But the only indictment and prosecution that we've seen in the past 20 something years has been that of a black officer who committed infraction against a white civilian. So that's one of the reasons why that's some of the reasons why we haven't had police officers being indicted. But with the induction of a civilian review board, that can change. And I believe that should be given the power to even make recommendations for prosecution. But prosecution will really depend on the prosecutor at the time. I've had conversation with the current prosecutor, city prosecutor elect, before he was elected. That's one of the promises he made, that he's going to hold police accountable, just as he's going to hold everyone accountable for their errors. And I just hope that he's going to keep up with that promise. And he's a man that has spent years being an attorney, being a judge. So he has lengthy years of experience. I will take him at his word that he's going to do that.
Well, this whole conversation is being ignited by the wrong killing of Mr. George Floyd. And recently, less than 10 days ago, we had an incident where a kid who was full of life, a law-abiding citizen, was gunned down from the back by Franklin County Sheriff, who was yet still it's too early to predict what the outcome will be. But where do you think that situation is at right now? What can we learn from this?
Yeah, I think we keep getting, every day new information keeps coming out. We don't have all the facts yet, but from what I've read and I've seen so far, because at the time that it was shot, the police department is claiming that he waved a gun at a police officer. The family is claiming that he had a sandwich. But the fact that has not been disputed is that it was shot at the back. So this is, and according to the family, he also has a license to have a weapon, So when we talk about Second Amendment, where what we're seeing within the American populace is that Second Amendment right is not an egalitarian right. What I mean by that is that if you are a minority, exhibiting your Second Amendment right in public can get you killed. But if you are white, displaying or exercising your Second Amendment right in public, even with assault weapons, will not get you killed. Even within the same week, there was a video on social media. I don't know if it happened this week or if it's something that has happened before. We saw a situation where a white man was stopped by two police officers here in Ohio. He had a gun. They saw the gun, and they had a conversation with him for minutes. And this guy exercised his right, told them he didn't come out of his car. He told them to turn on their webcam. He told them that he was going to drive away, and he did. But in the Goodson situation, it didn't even escalate to that. The man was walking away. Even, let's for the sake of argument, even if he waved a weapon at that officer while he was driving, he was driving away. Why did the officer pursue him? Why did the officer shoot him when he was going in? Because it was not a threat. So police officers should recognize that Black people also have Second Amendment rights just as white people. Because I don't believe if the color has been, if you flip the color, just imagine it was white, the police officer wouldn't have reacted that way. you will have thought, okay, well, he has a Second Amendment right. He's no longer a threat. What they could do is call for backup, go to his house. All they need to do is question him. He was not committing any crime. So having a weapon itself is not a crime, especially if you have a license to carry that weapon. It is a right that is guaranteed under the US Constitution, the Second Amendment.
Sounds like you're saying there are two Americas when it comes to justice. Since the kid had a concealed license, license to carry his weapon, and he have not displayed his weapon based on the eyewitnesses, where is the NRA in this situation?
Yeah, I believe that, in a situation like this, just like everything just rolls into, like I said, Second Amendment right is not for everyone.
That's right.
The way we exercise it, it depends on your color. It depends on your color, and that's why we have to talk, even with our kids. Even when you take them to the gun range, you get license for them. That you still have to tell them the fact that you have this right doesn't mean that you can exercise it just like every member of the society. Because the way they view you in public, the way that you'll be defended, should things go awry, is going to be different. Like you said, if he was white, maybe the NRA would have come to his defense that this man was exercising the Second Amendment right when he was shot, and we don't even know if that account was true. But for the sake of argument, just as a lawyer, I would still say that I would assume that he indeed waved his weapon while he was driving by the officer. If indeed he did that, that itself is not a ground for being killed because he was driving away. He wasn't in pursuit of that officer. So the officer was not standing his ground or doing anything that I believe was in lockstep with the law.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your time. That is Emmanuel Olawale. Thank you very much, brother.
And thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Give me a second.